Yeah, I do think the Bible does desire for us to believe by faith, but faith, when the Bible's talking about faith, it does not mean there's an absence of evidence. It's actually talking about in response to the evidence. So this is one of the reasons why Jesus did so many miracles, because there were people who came before him who said, we're the Messiah. You've all been waiting for the Messiah for hundreds and hundreds of years. I'm the Messiah. But they couldn't raise anybody from the dead, right? They couldn't walk on water. They couldn't heal the sick. So Jesus actually is doing these things to demonstrate to people that actually what I'm saying is true. So in order to get people to believe in him, he was actually giving them the evidence of the healings and the miracles and the raising of the dead and these kind of things to say, I'm different.
Well, welcome back to the Finding Something Real podcast, friend. This is your host, Janelle Wood, and I'm joined again today by my friends Katelyn and Sarah and a returning guest, Alycia. We just couldn't get enough of our conversation with her, and we recorded a few weeks ago, and we said, hey, would you come back on and keep talking to us? And so she's here, which is wonderful. But Sarah and Katelyn, you guys are here too, which is a huge gift. Katelyn, you came back to the States for a short bit. For the holidays, and then you went back to London to deal with your life there.
Yeah!
How's it going?
On New Year's Eve, got home. I took like an hour-long nap, and then got ready for a New Year's Eve party.
Ooh.
I mean, it wasn't hard staying up. Jet lag kicked my butt, dude. Oh. I was awake for a long past midnight, but it was great. It was fun.
Now, was it as low-key of a New Year's Eve party as like The Holiday? You remember that movie? Remember, it's a classic with Kate Winslet and Jude Law. No? Oh my gosh. No. You've never seen it? You've never seen it.
I know Kate Winslet from the Avatar movies. She's blue.
I know her from Titanic. Right, wasn't she the one in Titanic?
Yeah. So, like the lead girl, Rose.
Was that Kate Winslet?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I thought
she looks different blue.
Candace Cameron. You don't remember Jack Black? No, none of this. Katelyn, next time you're in the States, we need to watch this movie. It's a classic. Anyway, in the middle. I'm sorry. I thought I was being so cool with my cultural reference, and clearly I just dated myself. It's just fine. It's fine. Sarah, how are you?
I'm well. I have seen The Holiday, but I don't remember the party scene, so still not quite getting the reference.
It's just a home party.
I apologize.
Way off track. It's totally fine. Totally fine. I will say that between the last episode that we recorded with Alycia and this episode, we did get to talk to another UK person, our friend. I think that's where he lives. It all is very general for me, that side of the pond. But Andy Bannister was on here talking with us. And when we mentioned that we had just talked to Alycia Wood, he goes, oh, did you talk to her about hockey? Because she's a big NHL fan, and just get her talking about that.
Oh,
is
that's
that
so
true?
Funny.
What's going on about that?
I was a hockey player for probably, 20 years, something like that. Yeah, believe it or not. So and so that's what he's talking about. You know what's crazy though is I have veered away from the NHL a lot in the last, just in recent years or whatever. And I'm just much more NFL focused, so American football.
Who's your team?
Buffalo Bills. I've come from Rochester, New York, so we are Bills Mafia through and through up there, and it's just a disappointment every year. It's just really painful to be a Bills fan. So
I was gonna say they're not in it anymore, are they?
No, they're not.
But the Seahawks are.
The Seahawks are. They are doing really well.
Sorry. No mercy. By the time this airs, we'll probably know whether they disappointed us too. It happens. So we might all be like having some commiserating situations happening. But I did not know that about you. What position did you play?
So I kind of did everything, to be honest, except for goalie. I did a lot of defense. And then when I was in England, actually, I was center a lot. And then sometimes I'd be on the wings. I just honestly, just multiple places. Just kind of depended on the team and what they needed. But I've never been a goalie, and I'm okay with that because that's a whole nother thing.
Wow. You have to be a pretty good ice skater for that, don't you?
Yeah, that's really like the hardest part is because you've got to be able to do all the things that you do with the puck and the stick. And you have to do it like on ice, and the ice means that you're moving faster. It's not like you're just walking and doing it. Ice means you're doing this at an elevated speed. So all your motions, everything has got to be faster than what you would normally do. And you're trying to keep your balance, and you're on the edges, the edges, the blades have like two edges. Probably you don't know that. And so you're outside edge, inside edge, and you're just dealing with all those things. Yeah. So it's a whole thing.
I'm going to confess something right now that's not going to make me look good, but it's very honest. I used to go to hockey games, and we would sit right next to the glass. But the reason I loved those seats was because you could see the fights. I thought that was so cool. And
the boy aquarium. Yes.
Yeah. Did you ever get in fights? Is that a thing?
Not really. I mean,
no.
I kind of gotten one when I was in high school with this other kid on my team, but it was like I was on a co-ed team because in that era there was only boys hockey really for high school, so I was on a girls team. But I mean, there wasn't a girls team, so I had to play on the boys team. But wasn't very good because the boys are bigger and faster. But no, with women's hockey, there's not really much of that. None of the girls are really trying to mess up their hair or face. That kind of thing. So it's more you do things kind of behind the scenes and the ref's not looking. They get, girls get a little chippy, and they, so behind your, like the lower part of your leg, like your calf, I guess you call it, like behind there's no padding. They only have padding on the front because I guess they don't think you'll need it in the back. So that they don't have padding behind there. So if you want to just like hit them with your stick just to be nasty, girls can do that kind of stuff. I mean,
oh wow,
oh yeah,
wow.
Guys do that junk too, but yeah, I mean, you just know the spots where somebody doesn't have padding and just poke them in there.
Wow,
I do not do that.
I have a whole different view of you right now.
Yeah, I do not play dirty. It took me a long time to get a penalty. I think I was probably hockey player for like 10 years before I got a penalty. And it was a stupid one, like holding the stick. And I was like, seriously? That's what I got a penalty for?
So Andy Bannister was right. Shout out to Andy, who said that was a very topic for you. Who knew? Last time we were on here, we had a great discussion about the resurrection and Jesus and miracles and all of those things. And before we jump into part 2, I mean, we're talking about real life here, and that's exactly what we should be talking about. Mm-hmm. But Katelyn and Sarah, I know we debriefed it briefly right after the conversation, but what stuck with you from that? If nothing, that's totally fine. We're here right now. But Katelyn, we'll start with you.
What has stuck with me? I guess when I think about it, I mean, it's these sorts of conversations don't happen very often. So like the act itself, I guess, has been like interesting to think back on.
Mm-hmm. That makes
Never
sense.
really have given it much thought. So like the talking about it is even a step beyond that.
I love that you came back, Katelyn. You were like, when we recorded our little debrief session, you're like, I was not prepared for that. So
every time I'm like, I should take notes. No, I'm not going to do that.
So what brought you back? What brought you back today? This is the only the second episode with a guest that you've shown up for. Same guest, which is pretty great. But what compelled you to show up?
I guess I've just, when you ask me in such a way, it's really hard to say no when I don't already have plans. I'm going to be so honest. I was planning on playing Lego Jurassic Park for the rest of the night. And then it's like, she got me. I have nothing to say other than,
now you're stuck with us. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yay. I don't feel bad about that. Whatever it takes.
It is a good thing. I wouldn't be so easily acquisitional with anybody else.
Aw. Well, I'll take that as a compliment. Sarah, how about you? What stuck with you from the last conversation?
I'd be curious to hear what I said right after, because it has been a while. But I think what stuck with me was the story that you told, Alycia, of the woman who you say had a miracle healing. Because I've thought of that a few times since we talked, and I've been thinking in my own life of where I'm looking for miracles and how the Lord is faithful to do that in the timing that we don't expect. or that maybe doesn't make the most sense to us, but that we have the choice to still honor his faithfulness to us.
Hmm. I think something that stuck with me, if I remember correctly, I could just be making this up, but Sarah, was how you said, and it probably was after we recorded, but something about that it was encouraging for you to identify with Alycia, and the things that she was saying, that in your situation where you're like, I've got doubt, but I also want Jesus, it felt really good to go, wait a second. I identify more with Alycia than I do with Katelyn. Do you remember talking a little bit about that?
I do, now that you mentioned that. Yeah.
Yeah. And before we jumped on here, before we hit record, you mentioned listening to a podcast that I told you when you were talking to me about it. Those kind of conversations that you just listened to, and maybe you can share a little bit here, can be very swaying emotionally, and cause me to kind of question things. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit of that with Alycia, and then Alycia, if you want to share what stood out to you or whatever, we can just dive right in. But Sarah, I thought that would be a great segue,
Sure.
especially as someone who, wrestles with some stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. To me, I would use the word like dangerous or risky in how it feels to even interact with things that I know are going to cause me to doubt. But you can't just turn a blind eye either. So the podcast she's referring to is one that Alex O'Connor just posted, I think last week, with Brett McLaughlin, and the title of it, it's I think it was How to Save Christianity from Christians, and Rhett was talking about how one of the things he was talking about is how apologists have kind of damaged being a Christian because they're trying to look for the evidence that he says isn't really there. Because the whole thing to be a Christian is that we're supposed to have faith, that we're supposed to believe without seeing. And so he was really harping on a couple of points that he outlined to that effect. And I find that very compelling, because I know that there is evidence, but it's not as concretely proven as I would want it to be. So in a way that does deeply resonate with my skepticism of like, what is my belief rooted in? Is it all faith? Is it all evidence? Can it be some of both? Yeah, that was the episode. I recommend listening to it, but it's challenging to hear.
Can I jump in there?
Yeah, go ahead.
And just so, how, before you listen to that episode, how would you have defined faith?
I mean, my mind immediately goes to Hebrews 11. It's talking about faith is the evidence of things not seen. Or am I getting that right? The evidence.
I know, I know the verse you're talking about. Yeah, I can pull it up for the audience, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
word for word. Yeah, I think it is choosing to believe in something without completely understanding it, or having proof for it. And that is like a hopeful expectation of what you will see unfold in the future.
Okay. And how would you define it now? Would it change? Would your definition of faith have changed after listening to that episode?
I don't think it was a new perspective like that. Actually, I've been having a couple conversations around that topic of like, what is evidence to me? Is that like, how important is that to me? And if I don't have it, does my faith hinge on that? So I'd already kind of begun thinking that way. And after listening to the episode, I think I I was in a way encouraged, because Rhett wasn't trying to say like, don't be a Christian, that's stupid. He was saying, just realize that it is a decision based on faith, not on evidence.
Okay.
Really. And so I feel like right now I'm kind of in an odd position of
Yeah.
like, in the last few months, I feel that I have experienced God in a way that I never have before in my life, and like to a level that I can't really deny him working in me. And so it doesn't feel, I think if I listened to that months ago, it might have felt really discouraging and hopeless of like, if belief is all faith, then I can't believe.
Okay.
But now I think I have seen enough, or not seen enough, I've experienced enough, so that I can say yes, even if it is faith that is not evidence, that is not like physical, concrete, historical evidence, I can still choose to believe it.
Sure. Katelyn, can I ask you, what do you, when you hear faith and you hear religious people, specifically Christianity or Christians, whatever, that they say they have faith, to you, does faith mean kind of similar to what Sarah's saying, that like it's belief without evidence? Does that kind of sound like what you think of when you think of what the definition of faith is, or that Christians believe in something without evidence? Is that what she's saying, kind of align with where maybe you think when you think of Christians as well?
I mean, yeah, I guess so. That idea of not necessarily having like physical proof, but finding evidence where, like, oh yes, that is work of God right there, and that
Sure.
hardens my faith, strengthens my faith, not hardens.
Right.
That strengthens my faith, because I think that is God right there, whatever that is for that person.
Right. So it could be subjective, right? So for you're saying that maybe that person feels like it's evidence for them, but maybe not for somebody else. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, faith is different for everyone, right?
Okay. So this is really interesting, and I did not know about this episode. So it's definitely something. Thank you for, I guess, Janelle, for sharing to Sarah, and Sarah, tell me about it, because I didn't know about this episode. But yeah, Rhett. It's a funny thing to me when Rhett says apologists are ruining it because they're looking for evidence, because faith doesn't have evidence, or faith doesn't use evidence. And he's like, so he's acknowledged, he's almost like he's like, there's no evidence for Christianity, and apologists are ruining it because they're trying to find evidence. Isn't if there's no evidence for Christianity, wouldn't you want somebody to find evidence if it is indeed true? Like, it's weird to me that if you're saying there's no evidence for something, that you would negate somebody who's trying to find evidence for it, because it'd be like, if it's true, then we want evidence, we want to know. But that's just a side note. Thank you for your thoughts, Sarah. What you're experiencing, what you're feeling, and really, Katelyn, what you said as well, I would say are really common views that people look at faith, and people like, they think of faith as just kind of, well, I don't know if it's true, I hope it's true, maybe it's true. And because even in sometimes our common language, we'll say, well, I'll just have faith that she'll show up today, but you really don't know, and you don't have any evidence that your friend will show up today or something like that. Like, I invited my friend, I don't know if she's coming, she can be kind of iffy on things, so I'll just have faith that she'll show up. And really, you don't have any evidence either way, and you're just kind of saying faith therefore is, well, let's just kind of hope that she'll do what I'm hoping she'll do. And so I think that gets easily pushed into Christianity because it's the same word. But I think I would say I'm surprised that Rhett would hold that view, because Rhett was a former, I think he was Crew campus minister, right? So he would have had the opportunity to dig into things like something as basic as the definition of faith or the understanding of faith in Christianity. So let me see if I can maybe break it down a little bit easier, or maybe more accurately, because I don't think he's really presenting it in a very honest way. Yeah, I do think the Bible does desire for us to believe by faith, but faith, when the Bible's talking about faith, it does not mean there's an absence of evidence. It's actually talking about in response to the evidence. So this is one of the reasons why Jesus did so many miracles. because there were people who came before him who said, we're the Messiah. You've all been waiting for the Messiah for hundreds and hundreds of years. I'm the Messiah. But they couldn't raise anybody from the dead, right? They couldn't walk on water. They couldn't heal the sick. So Jesus actually is doing these things to demonstrate to people that actually what I'm saying is true. So in order to get people to believe in him, he was actually giving them the evidence of the healings and the miracles and the raising of the dead and these kind of things to say, I'm different. This is why when you put your trust in me, you can actually say, I know that I'm putting it in the right thing because I've given you these things. In fact, he says, and I can't remember where it is, but he says, believe in me if not for the evidence of the miracles themselves. And so what happens is we look at Hebrews 11. I'm glad you raised that. And I just pulled it up here on my handy dandy phone. It says, faith is being sure of what we hope for, being convinced of what we do not see. Okay, that's what it says in the new NET is that version. And oftentimes we think it's saying faith just means believing in something when there isn't evidence. And I don't think that's actually what it means. I think what it's actually saying is faith is giving the confidence that what we hope for, the confidence that what we do not see is actually there. So in other words, I have never seen Jesus. I've never seen him. But yet, but the faith that I have because of things that have happened in the past in terms of even just the Bible times and even kind of Sarah, like you're saying, even in my life, that gives me confidence that that faith that I hold for what I'm hoping that is true with when we die and being able to be with him for eternity. And also what we don't see, that's going to happen. It's telling me that faith, even when I can't see and I can't say, well, I've seen heaven, therefore I can tell you for sure that it's there. That faith, because of what my faith is built on, gives me the confidence that thing that I can't see, I'm going to actually experience, that it actually does exist because of all the things that undergirded the faith to come into existence in the first place. So, and I think, and so to say faith is for Christianity is without evidence, I don't think it's not an accurate reading, I would say, of the Gospels at all. And I think probably my favorite story of this would be Thomas. You may have heard of Thomas. He was a disciple of Jesus, right?
They talk about him in the episode. Yeah.
Do they?
Yeah.
Oh, well, Rhett and Alex better call me and tell me. I'll come on and I'll see what they're saying. Do you remember what they said about Thomas?
Well, they were both saying they really love that story because they identify with Thomas in like, show me, I want the proof, I want to see, and then I will believe.
Yeah. And then did they talk about what Jesus did?
Well, they were kind of getting into some of the details of it, saying that that Jesus says like, here I am, touch me, and it doesn't record that Thomas actually does. But it just says that he, at that point, acknowledges him as Lord.
Okay.
And so they just really nitpick on some of the details, but it's interesting.
Okay, so at least they have laid out the structure of the story. That's correct. It's interesting what they infer from it. But so for those who are listening, or maybe anybody who's not familiar with this story, Jesus dies. He rises from the dead and he appears to some women. Now, Thomas was a disciple. He had followed him. He'd seen him do different miracles and things like that. But when Jesus was crucified, the disciples were like, wow, we followed the wrong guy. Okay, because we were expecting this deliverer, somebody to help bring us out from under Roman occupation, because we've been held under Roman occupation. Before that, the Greeks and the Babylonians and the Syrians, blah, blah, blah. We were looking to be freed. And this person is now dead. So we're not going to be freed. And Jesus actually raises from the dead. He appears to the two women. And then he later on appears to the disciples. And Thomas wasn't there when he appeared to the disciples. And so they're like, wow, we've just seen Jesus. They're shocked. Like it wasn't something that they did. I think they began to look back over his life once they saw him raised from the dead and realized he was dropping hints about his resurrection, but they were missing it. Anyways, but Thomas isn't there. So when Thomas comes back, Jesus is gone. And they're like, we've seen Jesus. And he's like, oh, no, not me. You're not going to get me with that. You saw some ghost kind of thing. Like, until I see the nail prints in his hands and the scars in his side, like, I'm not going to believe it. He wants to touch it. He wants to see it. And so Jesus does come back. And this time Thomas is there. And he says to Thomas, look, you wanted to go ahead. put your fingers in my hands, put your fingers in my side. And then he says, stop doubting and believe. And I think this is where Rhett and Alex O'Connor were close, but they went off, they missed it. This was a very intentional order. What Jesus didn't say, hey, Thomas, I'm here. I heard you didn't believe in me. Believe in me now. Stop doubting and believe. Wait for Thomas to actually believe. And then Jesus goes, hey, by the way, why don't you look at my hands? In other words, what Jesus does is he says, Thomas, you want evidence? I'm going to give it to you. And then once you've seen the evidence, Thomas, now I'm asking you to believe. There's an intentionality behind the order. And when you look up where that phrase that stop doubting and believe, after Jesus shows him his hands and tells him to put his finger there and all that, when you look up when it's that phrase, stop doubting and believe, that stop doubting and believe, that word believe is the Greek word pistos, which means faith. Jesus is literally saying, stop doubting and have faith. So Jesus first gives him the evidence, then tells him to have faith. Guys, if faith is belief without evidence, then Jesus himself got it wrong. He first gave evidence and then asked for the faith. So in other words, the faith, he tells Thomas, in response to this evidence, it's time to actually believe that I am who I say I am. And that order and that intentionality is there. So Thomas, at that point, Thomas doesn't need to put his hands there. It's so funny to me that's what they focus on. Well, he didn't actually touch him because he didn't, whether he may have, but the fact that it's not recorded is irrelevant, because what Thomas's next phrase is, and I don't know if they said this, but Thomas's next phrase, the same man who doubted and said, I won't believe that you saw him. I won't believe that he rose from the dead until I see the nail prints and the scars in his side and all that. That same man, in response to Jesus showing him and saying, stop doubting and believe, he says, my Lord and my God. Thomas believed when he saw the evidence. So faith, guys, within Christianity is not at all about faith without evidence. It's the complete opposite. And Jesus himself gives us that model and shows us that it is. So that's the rest of the story, is the my Lord and my God. And then Thomas himself, as Christian tradition tells us, and if you were to go to India, the Christian church in India will tell you, that whatever the particular denomination is, will tell you that they started from Thomas. Thomas goes to India some 20 some odd years after Jesus rises from the dead, and he begins to preach the gospel there. That's why you meet so many Indians with the last name Thomas. And there's a beautiful church in Chennai, India, where they say that he was buried, or where his remains are. And you can go down, you can see this in the small chapel. I've seen it with my eyes. It's in this glass enclosure. And as you walk up to this enclosure, where is supposedly, can't say for sure, supposedly the remains of Thomas, there are 5 words written on his casket: my Lord and my God. And those words, that acknowledgement of Jesus as Lord, that acknowledgement of Jesus as God, was Thomas's direct response to seeing Jesus risen from the dead. It was a response to the evidence. So apologists aren't getting it wrong, Rhett. They're not getting it wrong, Alex O'Connor, because if I'm getting it wrong, then Jesus got it wrong. Faith has never been without evidence within Christianity. A lot of people like to say that, but that might be because they're actually not reading the text and they're not looking at themselves. Does that help make some sense of it, Sarah?
Yes, it gets into what is the evidence and why can you feel sure of it, which is just a whole big conversation. But
but that's a good conversation. No, that's I mean,
Katelyn's smiling. Katelyn, what are you smiling about?
Oh no, that's a whole new can of worms.
Yeah.
We like our cans of worms, ladies, I think. But I think and I think the short answer would be, I think it's going to be slightly different for different people. Mm-hmm. You know, like, so for Sarah, she might have an experience with God that might be like, that's amazing. Katelyn, that same experience isn't going to transfer to her. Experiences rarely transfer from person to person. So for Katelyn, she might need some sort of historical documentation, or she might need an answered prayer or something like that to have
She told us last time. Katelyn, do you remember what you said? Remember, you said,
I
go
think we
ahead.
were talking about like miracles and like I think my specific word, because afterwards I was like, was that cool what I said, or was that too far of like I don't think it's humanly possible to do it because like isn't that the whole point? I would need like without a shadow of doubt something not humanly possible,
Yeah.
only to be done by
Yeah.
power.
Right.
I think maybe is that right?
You would need an Indiana Jones moment. You've seen that movie?
Janelle.
What?
I mean, I've even seen Indiana Jones. I'm like, I'm not sure which one she's getting at here.
Raiders of the Lost Ark, the crazy figures that come out. Anyway.
I know there's like Nazis and like a giant ball.
Yeah, it's fine. At the end, they say, close your eyes. Anyway, I was just thinking one of the things, and maybe we could tie this in here to this conversation, but Katelyn, you brought up when we had the retreat, when we were recording back in the summertime, you said, like, why would Christianity be the only way? Like, and I think that is an interesting conversation related to the evidence, because if Jesus isn't who he said he was, then why even have conversations like this? Like, just believe what you want to believe. Like, have fun.
Right.
Figure out whatever works best for you. So maybe we can tie those two things together, Alycia, but I feel like that's a big question. And the evidence that God exists, I think, I've watched enough stuff. I've talked to enough people that I think it's really hard to deny that there's miracles. There's something out there that just doesn't make sense in the natural realm. Now, Katelyn, you may disagree with me, but there's a lot of like crazy stuff. But like specifically that it would be Jesus, I think is a whole other issue that maybe we could talk about a little bit, because it matters. That matters. So yeah. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Maybe the context was wrong, but when you were like, I think, if that was the case, then everybody would just be able to like what works best for you. And I think that's like great. I think that's the best option. Whatever level of Christianity, Hinduism, Judaism, all of the other ones that I have absolutely zero education for, if that's what works for you, that works for you.
Right.
I think like saying then, well, this is what I believe. And I guess my hesitations also stem from the idea of the punishment for not believing what you believe is like morally gray. But then like if like it's not just Christianity that has those views, so like I can't just say that of so yeah, whatever works for you is normally what I go with in terms of what's correct for you.
Let's talk about that. Alycia.
Well, Sarah, what do you think along those lines? Like, is it with Jesus, this idea that if it's wrong to say that Jesus is the only way, or it's unfair, or what do you think? So Katelyn was really clear. Like, she likes the idea of whatever works for you works for you. What are your thoughts? Which way do you think is better?
Yeah, I think it's attractive to hold that position because it makes it easy to get along with everybody. I think that there has to be one truth, like that just is reality, that there is one truth, but finding out what the truth is more where I struggle.
Okay. So you don't really oppose to one thing being true. It's just,
no,
how do we know that one thing is true? Right.
And I guess part of that is like the emotional heaviness of thinking that if there is one truth, then a majority of the world has it wrong and they're believing something that is not true.
Yeah.
Well, you've also shared with me, Sarah, that you're afraid of believing the wrong thing. Like, that's a really big fear of yours personally. So, yeah.
So I guess maybe some thoughts I have on that. Maybe we'll go back to Katelyn first. When we say, what's true for you, what's good for you is good for you, and I totally get that. And there's a part of me that was like, well, I'm kind of okay with that system too. But then when I begin to think about it, and when I'm saying that what works for you is what works for you, then I'm saying a couple things. Number one, I'm saying truth is irrelevant. So it's okay for you to believe in fairy tales and believe in, lies, or believe in incorrect stories, or believe in legends. That's okay. And in a sense, it's like, yeah, but that's just their life. Let them lead their life. But I don't really think that things work quite so simplistically when in cultures, because humans interact and humans, do life together. And whatever religion or non-religion that somebody follows, which is the second point, the second thing I think about with that statement is whatever religion that or non-religion somebody follows, it's going to impact their behavior towards other people. So for some people, what's right for them is to kidnap young girls and force them into marriages. That's what's right for them. That's what's best for them. And if I say, well, my stance is what's best for you is what's best for you, what works for you is what works for you, and that's best, that's great, then I'm not going to be able to stop it. I'm not going to be able to speak into it. I'm not going to have any kind of backbone to be able to say, hey, you shouldn't be doing this. And so in other words, all of my desires for justice or for things being right or things being good goes out the door, because my standard is whatever makes this individual happy. And the problem is that their decisions impact me, and they impact my friends, and they impact my family, and they impact people I don't even know. And so the challenge we have is truth. If truth isn't important, then a lot of things that we do in life probably become a whole lot less important. Like, do I need to show up for work on time? Well, I don't know. It doesn't really matter, because they say come at 8:00, but who knows? Truth doesn't really matter. Maybe I can come at 11 because truth is irrelevant. But I also think that it causes larger scale problems with us as a people, because what's best for you, what works for you, may bring harm to me, and it may not be what's best for me. Or what's best for me may be that it is to harm you. And that's where I think some of that becomes a little bit weaker of an argument, or maybe a little bit weaker of a better way than I guess maybe what Christianity, or maybe even, I'll just be Christianity, what Christianity has to offer. And but for Sarah, I appreciate your, first of all, compassion on other people, and this idea that the majority of the world has it wrong. I don't know what the quantities are, but still, at least to this day, Christianity is still the number one belief system in the world. However, the number two religion is close on its heels, right? And so, that doesn't mean that the majority of the world is Christian. That just means that it's of the religious people that Christianity is the one that they believe in. So yeah, it's quite possible that it does make up the majority of people that believe in all the other different religions and no religions. Absolutely. I mean, that would make complete sense. But I think a lot of that has to do with their choice. And so that they are believing the wrong thing. I mean, look at the conversation between Rhett and Alex. Okay. You take a story that they even talked about that actually refutes what they're saying, and they don't even put that line out there about how the evidence transformed Thomas. How first he gets shown the evidence, and then he's told to believe. How first the evidence is given before faith. Right? So you have the opportunity to see that what you're saying is incorrect, even in the story. And they don't do it. They don't take that opportunity. And I think one of the things that's hard for a lot of people to understand, and believe you me, guys, this was the hardest thing for me to understand. I thought in my young, naive mind, I'm going to be an apologist. And the reason why people don't believe is just because they don't know the evidence and they just don't have anybody to answer their questions. So I'm going to answer their questions and they're just going to believe. And then I started answering people's questions. And you know what I found is that I would answer their questions and they would just come up with more. And I'd answer those and they would just come up with more. Like, in other words, they kind of felt like, and I think they're not alone, but as long as I have a question to throw back at you, then that means your argument doesn't work. And I don't think that's true at all. You can always come up with a question. The point is, have we looked at the comprehensive case of what we know and say, okay, it is way more likely that this Christianity thing is true than what the view is that I hold. And I think a lot of times some people just, they don't want to believe. And that's then the hardest thing for me. One of the hardest things for me when I was an apologist or in the early days to realize some people just don't want to believe. You know how many people I've talked to about the Delia Knox walking, that video that I mentioned last time of her, being paralyzed and walking. People want evidence for a miracle. In the end, they want evidence for Christianity and they want a miracle. And I give them this. And I've said it, for the past 12 years, I've told people this. When I was in America, in England, in Scotland, I've told people this. And not one single person, in Canada, let me throw Canada, I was definitely in Canada. And no matter who I told this to, nobody watched the video and was like, okay, I wanted evidence, I got it. I wanted a miracle, I got it. Therefore, Christianity is true. Not one. The response that I heard, the most popular response that I heard, was that her brain was able to spontaneously heal itself. In other words, when you get what you've asked for, you still don't want to believe. And it's because, I can come up with another explanation. But that doesn't mean that new one is right. It doesn't mean that this explanation is no longer true. Just because you can come up with a question doesn't negate the validity that she was healed. And so what happens is they just keep thinking, as long as I can throw different questions out there, as long as I can give other explanation, that must mean this isn't it. And so I think I had to start to realize there's plenty of people in this world that are not Christians, not because of lack of evidence, but because they don't want to believe. There's also plenty of Christians out there that don't want, or not Christians, but people out there that Christianity asks you to live a certain way, and they don't want that. And so there's a variety of reasons why people don't follow Christianity, but I think a lot of times we blame God for that. And I was definitely part of that camp. And I'd be like, God, why aren't you more obvious? Why don't you show yourself more? These people are asking you, why don't you do it, God? Like, that's so mean. And then I was at a well-known university in America and met an atheist. A couple months later, I hear he's a Christian. And I'm like, what? Because he was not at all interested in Christianity. He had asked God to show himself. His words, not mine. He's sleeping one night and somehow he has something happens, some divine experience. I don't even remember what it was anymore, but it wakes him up and he knows it's God. God is in the room, whatever the situation was. This atheist was like, oh my goodness, I just experienced, God just showed himself to me, and he becomes a Christian like that. I'm like, okay, God, you did it. You showed yourself. That's amazing. What was it 3 months, 6 months later? He started writing, he was learning, or he was asking questions about the Bible that he was like, I don't know if I can answer this. And rather than saying, let me do further research, he just walked away from Christianity altogether. Went back to atheism. So wait a minute, you get this encounter, your words with God that other people are asking for, and you still walk away from him. And you look at Jesus and how many people walked away from Jesus. And so I think the fact that there's so many people who could get it wrong, to me, I don't blame God for that anymore, to be honest. I used to, but then I started seeing it differently. So going back to our original question on this idea of is Christianity the only way? Does it sound mean? I'm not sure what other way is better. Because what Christianity asks is that you just believe that Jesus lived, he died on the cross, he is Lord, he's God, and then he rose from the dead. That's what it asks of you. What it doesn't say is you have to say this prayer, this many prayers, this many times. It doesn't say you have to do this number of good things to 8 people every single day. It doesn't say you need to come up with a moral system that's perfect and follow it. Like, it doesn't put all these burdens. It says believe. It's almost too easy. And so I've listened to kind of other ways, like, and I've asked you, what are the other ways then that God could have done this? And I just have never gotten one that is better. I've never got an idea that's better. And so I don't think it's unfair that Christianity would say there's one way, because what it does is it frees you from having to worry as to whether or not you did enough right things today to earn God's acceptance. And it frees you from having to wonder, did I say the right things? Have I been rejected from God today? Or what if, like, is there any way I can have confidence? There's like, I don't know, like, there's just all the different ways that people have as they try to climb their way to God. It just frees you from that, is what I'm trying to say. And to me, I just feel like that's a way that it couldn't be any easier for people. So you're welcome to share some thoughts on that and tell me where you think, maybe I'm missing something here, or maybe I got something wrong, or maybe I'm not considering something. So feel free to tell me, Alycia, I don't know about that, or whatever, in response.
I agree with you. I think that people have the choice to believe or not. I wonder about what you're saying with it being a subjective experience with God. I think you do need the evidence to differentiate that from a different religion, because if you have an experience with the Lord, then you can be a Christian and a believer, but you can't necessarily negate other people's experiences, saying that a different God is real. So you do need some base of evidence, and I think I'm still investigating that side of things to find what is solid. Katelyn, I wonder if I could ask you what you think about Christianity now. Like, is it at all attractive to you, or do you completely not want to believe it?
I don't want to, and I don't think I could. Like, it's definitely a combination of what you were saying, of knowing that one truth of, like, this is all you have to do, is freeing. Like, that sounds like the opposite of freedom to me. Like, I would feel so not free knowing that that is the only way. So I think it's a combination of not wanting to, because then I also, like, we were saying, like, what's best for you could be not the best for everybody else. And what I think is the key difference is, like, what's best for you is exactly that. It shouldn't have an effect on anybody else. Like, me not believing in God should not have an effect on you, because it doesn't affect who I am as a person, in terms of I'm still going to lead with kindness in the most ways that I can, just like I assume all of you lovely ladies do. The feeling scared of there only being one truth, and then not knowing if you pick the right one, and if every person around you also as well, and that, like, that sounds horrible. Like, that sounds like something I would not like to feel. So it's really, I wish you didn't have to feel like that uncertainty. I really want that to be figured out for you, however it comes to you. But yeah, did that answer your question? What was the original one?
No, that was good.
Good.
I think that was good. And I think, when I think about evidence, I was a criminal justice major. Okay. And when you look at a crime scene, evidence is a combination of multiple things and not just one thing. And the more evidence you have, the more it excludes other possibilities from being the answer. So if you have two things, let's say, at a crime scene, two pieces of evidence at a crime scene, If you're lucky enough to get like something you get like DNA from, well, that's going to be great. But if it's not something that's, DNA that you can test and just link to a person, you'd rather have 50 pieces of evidence than 2. Because chances are the more evidence you have, the more it's going to eliminate some other thing. So if you go in a house and you think somebody's been attacked because you see blood, but there's no body, but you don't find tiger hair anywhere, you're like, well, it's probably not a tiger, right? And you don't find bear hair, you're like, it's probably not a bear. Like, in other words, if the more evidence that you find, and let's say you do find hair, and you're like, okay, that narrows it down to a human or these 2 types of animals or something like that. Now you've eliminated, now you're down to 3 possibilities, right? So the more evidence you find, the more it narrows the case down to a few possible options, and maybe even just to one option. And the way that I look at evidence as an apologist is I don't look at it as a singular thing. In other words, I don't just say, hey, Delia Knox got up from her wheelchair and started walking. Well, therefore Christianity's true. Actually, no. That's one piece of a larger room of evidence that I hold. So it's whether it's like the origins of a universe. Well, that's a piece of evidence that, because science has no explanation that has been considered valid as to how we got here. There's theories, but there's no explanation. People always say evolution. It's like, no, evolution is a process theory. It's not an origins theory. It doesn't tell us how things began. It talks about how once things began, how they went from more simple to more complex, etc. beings, but it doesn't have an origins piece. There's no scientific answer for origins as to how we got here. What created everything? So the origins question is answered by God, but that's, like Katelyn was saying, that could be multiple religions though. Or maybe it was Sarah that was saying that that's not unique to Christianity. And Muslims would say the same thing. Jews would say the same thing, right? So that's not unique just because there's God. If I would say, well, there's, like this innate sense we have in our lives about stuff being morally right and morally wrong. Well, that's evidence for God, but it's not evidence for Christianity. Muslims would say that God gives us morality and these kind of things too. That wouldn't be inconsistent. So, so as I build up my room of evidence, origins, our desire for meaning, to know that what we do in this life actually matters. Why would we have that? If we are hardwired for survival, which is what evolutionary theory teaches, that we are wired to survive. It's the survival of the fittest. We need our strongest and most healthy to reproduce and continue our species. Then why in the world do I care about meaning? All I need to do is survive. I don't have to have a meaning here. I just need to live to reproduce, to keep our species going. Why do I care that it lives? Why do I have this desire to know whether it matters if I lived at all? Yet so many people have this desire for meaning. And so, like, in other words, like somehow we have this sense that our life is supposed to matter. And so then I look, but these are still general of a divine being. What makes me more convinced more Christianity thing is going to be the credibility of the Bible itself, how the Bible cities and archaeology, how the Bible cities line up with what archaeological finds tell us about the cities and the time frames. We've got stuff written in the Bible that's written outside of the Bible by other historical societies, and within the Old Testament, they're talking about the Israelites. Like, these outside sources talk about the Israelites. They met people. They mention names. They mention cities. They mention places. David is written out in a general sense outside of the Bible. So you have all of these things. And that's like gives me credibility from an archaeological standpoint as to what's in the Bible. Jesus, we know, existed from history. We know we never found his body. We have no explanation for his body. So my point is, my room grows with the evidence, Sarah. So when I see a Delia Knox miracle thing, I can add that to my room, but my room already has a whole collection of evidences. And I think the case for Christianity is built on a breadth of evidences and not just a singular one. Outside, of course, I think the resurrection of Jesus is hugely evidential, and without it, Christianity dies away. But I think for me, it's definitely going to be what gives us the best answer now that I have all these pieces of evidences, because Islam is going to believe that Jesus didn't even die on the cross. Well, we know from historical record, the Romans write about that he died on the cross. The Jews write that he died on the cross. So we know he died on the cross. That's outside the Bible. So that would make me say, in my room full of evidence, if we know Jesus died on the cross, Islam says he didn't, that can't be true. So that leaves me with Christianity and Judaism. Judaism does deny he died on the cross. So do you see how the more evidence you have, it starts to eliminate things, and you start to narrow it down to, for me, there's no other explanation that fits all these evidences than Christianity. So Sarah, I wouldn't look for one thing. I think
Right.
I think it's bigger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Katelyn, just one question for you based on our conversation. Given what Alycia has shared, and I'm sure some of it rubbed the wrong way, because I was trying to put myself in your shoes as she was talking. I thought, oh, that would be interesting. But where does the desire to be kind come from if it is all natural, if it is all, if there is no creator?
I guess it goes hand in hand. I think we've talked about it before. I can't remember if it was with Miss Alycia or not, but that idea of like, well, because I don't think there is an afterlife, I don't think there was a before life or like things like that, that makes this life the most and only one, which in itself gives purpose, I guess, of like, why are we here? To survive, and like, well, what does survival look like for you? And to survive, there needs to be kindness. That idea of like monkey brain potentially like sharing fruit, or lizard brain sharing the nice warm rock, like things like that, of your purpose knowing that this is the one life you get, so live it. Because you don't get another one, like there is nothing afterwards. You gotta look forward to tomorrow. That answer again, I'm wondering if I'm even answering these questions.
No, you are.
You
Yeah.
are. You're answering it. And I guess here's a final question for you, Alycia. We already gave you the final question last time. Finding something real is about restoration, eternity, authenticity, and love. And so in response to Katelyn and Sarah, and wrapping this up here, I want to ask you this question. It's been an interesting thing, right? What Katelyn just shared about this is just one life, and we've got to live it the best we can. As much as Katelyn, you think that following God and saying you're God and I surrender to you, and how scary that is, like the idea of like this being it, knowing how messed up I am. I'm like, oh man, that's terrifying. So my question for Alycia is, why are you a Christian? You've looked at it from all different angles. Why? Katelyn didn't even talk about, but I could. Christianity from the outside looks like it has a pretty bad PR problem, especially here in the United States right now.
Yeah,
it's
okay.
just, and a lot of online dialogue from Christians is pretty ugly. And I say that as somebody who loves my brothers and sisters in Christ, but I see more mudslinging back and forth that other people can see. It's so painful to see. So why choose Jesus in the midst of all of that? Why give your life to this kind of stuff? What is it for you?
So, Katelyn, I'm going to ask you two quick questions, and then I'm going to answer this. Pretend you're living in England. We've never met. We've never had any of these podcasts.
Okay.
And you see Christianity online, and you see like Janelle said, the PR. You see what you know of Christianity is what you see online. Would you want to be a Christian?
No.
Okay. I'll say this. If what you knew of Christianity, and this is probably an unfair question because it's putting a big heavy burden on the podcast. But let's say again, you're living in England, you know nothing of Christianity. But what you know is your encounters with Janelle, your conversations with her, conversations with me, conversations with Sarah. And you may not say, yeah, I just believe this. But do you think your attitude towards Christianity would be more friendly?
I really hope I have not come off as unfriendly.
No, you haven't.
But
I meant in comparison to the first example of seeing Christians on the public.
I mean, I don't think I would be in any position where I would be. Of course, I'm willing to hear, like that's why hear. I'm willing to like listen and converse, but me as a person, I'm not sure it would have any effect in terms of the idea of like I can't remember the exact words you said of like knowing that all you have to do is to have
Believe in Jesus, let's say.
What that means to believe in Jesus. I think that even without because I understand there are going to be terrible people no matter what everywhere, with any sort of excuse to be terrible. I don't think it would change where I'm coming from of it's not something that I want to align with or can align with. It's like a weird balancing beam
Yeah, sure.
between the two.
Sure.
And it's not just Christianity. It's all faiths of a higher being or other power.
Yep, sure.
I'm not too well versed in the vocabulary.
No, it's good. So I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Was there something else you were going to say?
No, I don't think so. I think that answered the question.
100% it did. Yeah, no, I think I think you give yourself too little credit. I think your vocabulary is just fine, and your perception and your experiences and what you're seeing, I think, are valid. So in considering your answer, considering Sarah's thoughts, why am I a Christian? Why Christianity? And I think I would say I have looked at other belief systems, and I find flaws with them. Whether it's that God demands something of me in terms of and before I'm accepted, I've got to do a bunch of really good things before I'm accepted. That's a problem for me because it's conditional love, and certain religions will teach that. I think I look at atheism and I think it's something without any evidence. Like when we spent so much time talking about evidence, but what's the evidence for atheism, right? If like to say that there is no God is a declaration, and I'm often like, okay, well, where's the evidence? And I'm a good criminal justice major, so I'm like, well, where's the evidence, right? And I take that into Christianity. So even if people don't like my Christian evidence, at least I'm bringing something to the table. And I think as a Christian, I think I want everybody to follow something that's true. And evidence is definitely one way in which something is true. So I think, but when I look at the other religions, I find problems with. I look at atheism, I don't see evidence. And I think there's fundamental problems with not having any moral guideline. Because as we know by looking around our world, we aren't all nice. Katelyn is. I don't doubt that. But a lot of us are not. And what's best for me and my survival is to make you miserable. That's why we have a prison system, because there's people who choose themselves over the well-being of somebody else. And so in a culture without a moral framework, we can't even have a prison system, because there's no right or wrong. It's just whatever we decide today, but it's not objectively right or wrong. And so I look at all these things and I think, how do I make sense of the world I see around me? And then I land on Christianity, but I also think the character of Jesus and who he is, demonstrating to us forgiveness while being crucified, demonstrating to us gentleness and humility and restraint while being questioned by Pilate. When I see him teach about loving your enemies is actually the best way. That makes no sense to me as a human being, that somehow loving my enemies could be good. But then when you read the stories of people who have forgiven those who have killed people they loved, and the healing it brings to the offender who did it. And you're like, what? Loving my enemies actually works. When I see these things, then I see, wow, Jesus is really teaching something that I wouldn't have deduced on my own. His wisdom is beyond mine, then he must know things beyond mine. And so I think what I find about Christianity attractive, why I'm a Christian, is a comprehensive case that goes beyond just the evidence. But it goes on to the fact that it actually works in our lives, in our everyday lives. And I would not, as a human being, have created these rules or these behavioral, I don't want to say suggestions, it's a little too lightly, but behavioral directives maybe, because it would never have made sense to me as a human. But I think that Christianity has a lot to offer. And when I on here see Ali, one of the world's leading atheists, who says the meaningless of life, even though her life was good, the meaningless of life as an atheist, she could not do it anymore. Alcohol was no longer pacifying the pain. Therapists weren't pacifying the pain. So one finally said, I think what's going on with you is you're spiritually bankrupt. And she starts to look at religions, and she finds Christianity to be what she was looking for. Living life without God no longer became livable for one of the world's leading atheists. And to me, that shows that there's a bankruptcy there that thankfully I think Christianity satisfies. And so, yeah, I think, again, my why am I a Christian? I think there's multiple reasons, but I think overall it's demonstrated itself to be true, not just from an evidence, but from a practical stance, that the teachings of Jesus actually do work and actually do, if we follow them, make us the better people, make us better friends and neighbors to those around us.
It's a compelling case. Alycia Wood, thank you so much for coming back on here. Katelyn and Sarah, loved having you. What a gift. I sure hope you come back, Katelyn. I think that you're naturally gifted at asking great questions and giving a different perspective and doing it in a way that is not offensive, that's very kind. And it's a great, it's a great perspective to have on here. So I hope you come again. You're valuable and you matter. And if nothing else that you take from the Christian worldview, I hope you know that that is absolutely 100%. There's no such thing as anybody who is a throwaway person, and we're all created in his image. So thank you guys so much. Until next time.